We have to teach our Veatch Board of Governors to really hit that bell loud. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Shelter Rock on this wonderful intergenerational Sunday, which also is our Veatch Sunday for 2019. And you will see and hear from the members of the Veatch Board of Governors in the course of this service. I'm the Reverend Ned White, the interim senior minister here at the congregation, serving with the Reverend Jennifer Brower and the Reverend Dr. Natalie Fenimore. Natalie is on sabbatical for this period of time. I invite you to join us, please, today for UU Cafe. And as is our custom, first-time visitors to our congregation should stop by the member welcome desk in the lobby to pick up a voucher for a free lunch. Who says there ain't no free lunch? Here it is, a free lunch. So please help yourselves. We are fortunate and delighted to have a panel discussion at 1 p.m. featuring our visiting Veatch grantees who are doing inspiring and powerful work in the world, often against formidable opposition to make our democracy work for everyone. So please join us in the Social Hall at 1 o'clock. There's an important program on Tuesday of this week, everything you wanted to know about transgender, non-binary, and intersex people, but were afraid to ask, 7 p.m. in the Art Gallery. This is a particularly critical time for trans people. There's gender legislation in Albany to expand rights and a Supreme Court decision restricting the rights of trans people to serve in the military. So it's one of the most critical civil rights issues of our time. Please come to support these courageous citizens this Tuesday at 7 o'clock in the Art Gallery. Other program announcements are in your order of service. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce the chair of the Veatch Board of Governors, Carol Alexander. Carol?
Thank you, Ned. Good morning. As Ned said, I'm Carol Alexander. I'm chair of the Veatch Board of Governors, and I'm so happy to be here with you this morning for Veatch Sunday. This is a special year because it's the 60th birthday of the Veatch program, and what a wonderful history we have. Veatch is known throughout the philanthropic community and in every UU church as having greatly shaped the social justice organizing in our country. I think you know our existing society causes many to suffer. So I like to think of our 185 grantees as our special, very own Justice League. And their power is in helping others, the marginalized, to become superheroes themselves. Now, it's not quite 60 years, but I have been a member for 45 years. Yes, right, wow. And even way back on Plandome Road, that some of you will remember and others of you may have heard about, our former home, I voted every year with the congregation to support the Veatch program. A little secret is, I was never sure exactly what Veatch did. But I trusted that we were doing the right thing. And I believe that many in our congregation are still voting every year based on trust. And I'm okay with that, because I believe there is no trust that is better founded than the Veatch program. Thank you for trusting us. Thank you for keeping the faith. And now I'd like to introduce the Executive Director, Joan Manieri.
Thank you, Carol. I am honored to welcome the Reverend Starsky D. Wilson, who will deliver the sermon today. Reverend Wilson is the president and CEO of the Deaconess Foundation in St. Louis, Missouri. He is an acclaimed organizer for justice and child well-being. Reverend Wilson co-chaired the Ferguson Commission, formed by Missouri's governor following the tragic death of Michael Brown Jr. in 2014. At Veatch, we have valued the opportunity to work closely with Reverend Wilson in support of his vision of community marked by justice, peace, and love. Following the service and UU Cafe, Reverend Wilson will facilitate a panel discussion with Veatch grantee partners who have traveled from throughout the country to come and explore with us an extremely important topic for our times: the many ways in which the criminalization of vulnerable and marginalized people separates us and undermines our democracy. We welcome Mary Hooks from Southerners on New Ground in Atlanta, Georgia, Zachary Norris from the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights in Oakland, California, and Jessica Juarez Scruggs from the People's Action Institute, who's here with us today from Washington, D.C. We are deeply grateful to Jessica, Zachary, Mary, and Reverend Wilson for taking time away from their families and their very difficult work in their communities to be with us this weekend. I also want to express our gratitude to Carson Jones and to the families, young people, and RE teachers who have made it possible for us to share in worship today. And of course, to Stephen, the choir, musicians, the UUCSR Jazz Ensemble, our deepest thanks. Klaus?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Klaus Massich. I am the president of this congregation and a member of the Veatch Board of Governors, as that position entitles me to be. As is our custom, I would like you now to greet your neighbors.
pleased to invite Jennifer Roberts, Ralph Gasparello, and Jenny Son Gasparello forward to light our chalice this morning. We enter with these words, I and you, us and them, winning and losing, victor and vanquished. These are no more than the tricks of the mind, exiled from the heart. The face we see before us is no other than our own. The person we see before us is ourself in another guise. What else can we do but open our hearts? What else do we need to do? Each morning, we must hold out the chalice of our being to receive, to carry, and to give back.
And invite you all to join together in singing hymn number 1023 in the Teal hymn book. It's in the Teal book, 1023, Building Bridges. Please rise in body or spirit as we sing this together.
Actually, we'll try this as a round. And I'm glad we're building bridges, not walls, I must say that. So I hope you'll sing it with that enthusiasm. Let's do it twice through together, and then we'll sing it as a round. We'll start, this side will be number 1 with the sopranos, using the center aisle. That side will be 2 with the altos. Balcony, you get the tenors and basses. So twice through together, and then twice through as a round. Again, together.
Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions. Friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions.
For the words and song of affirmation that are printed in your order of service. And say together, love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace and seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need, this do we affirm in covenant with each other.
Every
Good morning. I am Carson Jones. It is my honor to serve as your Lifespan Religious Education Coordinator. This year, in children's worship, we have been talking about heroes, and I was delighted to hear Carol call the Veatch grantees superheroes, because indeed they are. Your children have had some fabulous answers when asked what it means to be a hero. They've said a hero is brave, a hero helps people, and most of all, a hero is a really good listener. I'd like to invite up one of my heroes, and I'm sure one of yours as well, who is probably the best listener ever, because he can hear things no one else can. On the 15th of May, in the jungle of Newell, in the heat of the day, in the cool of the pool, he was splashing, enjoying the jungle's great joys, when Horton, the elephant, heard a small noise. So Horton stopped splashing. He looked toward the sound. That's funny, thought Horton. There's no one around. Then he heard it again, just a very faint yelp, as if some tiny person were calling for help. I'll help you, said Horton, but who are you? Where? He looked and he looked. He could see nothing there but a small speck of dust blowing past through the air. I say, murmured Horton, I've never heard tell of a small speck of dust that is able to yell. So you know what I think? Why, I think that there must be someone on top of that small speck of dust. Some sort of a creature of a very small size, too small to be seen by an elephant's eyes. Some poor little person who's shaking with fear that he'll blow in the pool. He has no way to steer. I'll just have to save him because, after all, a person's a person, no matter how small. So gently, and using the greatest of care, the elephant stretched his great trunk through the air, and he lifted the dust speck and carried it over, and placed it down safe on a very soft clover. Humph! Humphed a voice. 'Twas a sour kangaroo, and the young kangaroo in her pouch said, humph, too. Why, that speck is as small as the head of a pin. A person on that? Why, there never has been. Believe me, said Horton, I tell you sincerely, my ears are quite keen, and I heard him quite clearly. I know there's a person down there, and what's more, quite likely there's 2, even 3, even 4. Quite likely a family for all that we know. A family with children just starting to grow. So please, Horton said, as a favor to me, try not to disturb them. Just please let them be. Through the high jungle treetops, the news quickly spread. He talks to a dust speck. He's out of his head. Just look at him walk with that speck on that flower. And Horton walked, worrying almost an hour. Should I put this speck down? Thought Horton with alarm. If I do, these small persons may come to great harm. I can't put it down. I won't. After all, a person's a person, no matter how small. Then Horton stopped walking. The speck voice was talking. The voice was so faint he could just barely hear it. Speak up, please, said Horton. He put his ear near it. My friend, came the voice. You're a very fine friend. You've helped all us folks on this dust speck no end. You've saved all our houses, our ceilings, and floors. You've saved all our churches and grocery stores. You mean? Horton gasped. You have buildings there, too? Oh, yes, piped the voice. We most certainly do. I know, called the voice, I'm too small to be seen, but I'm mayor of a town that is friendly and clean. Our buildings to you would seem terribly small, but to us, who aren't big, they are wonderfully tall. My town is called Whoville, for I am a Who. And we Whos are all thankful and grateful to you. And Horton called back to the mayor of the town, You're safe now, don't worry, I won't let you down. But just as he spoke to the mayor of the speck, 3 big jungle monkeys climbed up Horton's neck. They snatched Horton's clover, they carried it off to a black-bottomed eagle named Vlad Vladikoff. Far, far beyond Horton, that eagle kept flapping, and over his shoulder called back, Quit your yapping, I'll fly the night through. I'm a bird, I don't mind it. I'll hide this tomorrow where you'll never find it. He let that small clover drop somewhere inside of a great patch of clovers 100 miles wide. Then on through the afternoon, hour after hour, Horton found them at last on the 3 millionth flower. My friends, cried the elephant, tell me, do tell. Are you safe? Are you sound? Are you whole? Are you well? From down on the speck came the voice of the mayor. We've really had trouble, much more than our share. When that black-bottom birdie let go and we dropped, we landed so hard that our clocks have all stopped. Our teapots are broken, our rocking chairs smashed, and our bicycle tires all blew up when we crashed. So Horton, please, pleaded that voice of the mayor's, will you stick by us Who's while we're making repairs? Of course, Horton answered, of course I will stick. I'll stick by you small folks through thin and through thick. Humph, humped a voice. For almost 2 days you've run wild and insisted on chatting with persons who've never existed. Such carryings on in our peaceable jungle. We've had quite enough of your bellowing bungle, and I'm here to state, snapped the big kangaroo, that your silly nonsensical game is all through. And the young kangaroo in her pouch said, me too. Grab him, they shouted, and cage the big dope, lasso his stomach with 10 miles of rope, tie the knots tight so he'll never shake loose, and then dunk that dumb speck in the bezelnut juice. Horton fought back with vigor and vim, but the Wickersham gang was too many for him. They beat him, they mauled him, they started to haul him into his cage, but he managed to call to the mayor, don't give up, I believe in you all, a person's a person, no matter how small. And you very small persons will not have to die if you make yourselves heard. So come on now and try. The mayor grabbed a tom-tom. He started to smack it, and all over Whoville, they hooped up a racket. They rattled on kettles. They beat on brass pans, on garbage pail tops and old cranberry cans. They blew on bazookas and blasted great toots, on clarinets, oompas and boompas and flutes. Great gusts of loud racket rang high through the air. They rattled and shook the whole sky, and the mayor called up through the howling mad hullabaloo, hey, Horton, how's this? Is our sound coming through? And Horton called back, I can hear you just fine, but the kangaroo's ears aren't as strong quite as mine. They don't hear a thing. Are you sure all your boys are doing their best? Are they all making noise? Are you sure every who down in Whoville is working? Quick, look through your town. Is there anyone shirking? Through the town rushed the mayor from the east to the west, but everyone seemed to be doing their best. Everyone seemed to be yapping or yipping. Everyone seemed to be beeping or bipping. But it wasn't enough. All this ruckus and roar, he had to find someone to help him make more. He raced through each building. He searched floor to floor, and just as he felt as he was getting nowhere, and almost about to give up in despair, he suddenly burst through a door, and that mayor discovered one shirker quite hidden away in the Fairfax Apartments, apartment 12J. A very small shirker named Jojo was standing, just standing, and bouncing a yo-yo. Not making a sound, not a yip, not a chirp, and the mayor rushed inside, and he grabbed the young twerp, and he climbed with the lad up the Eiffelberg Tower. This, cried the mayor, is your town's darkest hour. The time for all who have blood that is red to come to the aid of their country, he said. We've got to make noises in greater amounts. So open your mouth, lad, for every voice counts. Thus he spoke as he climbed, and when they got to the top, the lad cleared his throat, and he shouted out, Yop! And that yop, that one small extra yop, put it over. Finally, at last, from that speck on that clover, their voices were heard. They rang out clear and clean. And the elephant smiled. Do you see what I mean? They've proved they are persons, no matter how small. And their world was saved by the smallest of all. How true. Yes, how true, said the big kangaroo. And from now on, you know what I'm planning to do? From now on, I'm going to protect them with you. And the young kangaroo in her pouch said, me too. From the sun in the summer, from the rain when it's fallish, I'm going to protect them, no matter how smallish. Thank you.
So we're going to sing the children to their classes with our traditional, we are rising up like phoenix from the fire, so brothers and sisters, spread your wings and rise higher. Rising up like the phoenix from the fire.
The recipient of today's offering will be Veatch grantee Communities United for Police Reformed, based in New York City. They are strengthening the ability of community members to hold law enforcement accountable. After many years of organizing, Communities United for Police Reform recently helped secure the Right to Know Act in New York City. This will help prevent unnecessary police encounters and require that the NYPD be more transparent when interacting with the public. The Right to Know Act is a tremendous win for all New Yorkers, and especially for those who are most vulnerable to police misconduct. Those who are working class, young people of color, and people who are undocumented. Will the ushers please come forward?
Good morning. These are the words of Martin Niemöller, a prominent Lutheran pastor in Germany who emerged as an outspoken public foe of Adolf Hitler and spent the last 7 years of Nazi rule in concentration camps. He is perhaps best remembered for these words. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me.
In the spirit of Pastor Niemöller's words, drawing upon the promptings of our own hearts, I invite you to come forward to light candles of joy or sorrow, memory or hope. Today's pastoral meditation is based on the invocation I offered at an interfaith community service at St. Paul's AME Zion Church in Great Neck on January 13th. Let us enter into an attitude of prayer. God of all people, all faiths, and all doubts, we thank you for calling us together once again to hear testimony from bold leaders who are seeking to make real Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision of our democracy transformed. We ask for your gift of wisdom, granting our minds new insights about what our communities need to make them places of nourishment and enjoyment for all who call them home. We ask for your gift of vision, opening our imaginations and giving us creative ideas for strengthening the bonds of community among diverse and even conflicting interests. We ask for your gift of courage, emboldening us as we work together to draw upon the highest dictates of our faith, far removed from any and every form of narrow self-interest. We ask for your gift of patience, teaching us the art of non-anxious presence with one another in our efforts to build community, reminding us that change takes time, that progress, not perfection, is our goal. Finally, we ask for your gift of compassion, kindling in our hearts the fires of love and mutual respect that will knit us together into a single caring community in which our children and our children's children will thrive. God of all people, all faiths and all doubts, be present here in our midst, inspiring us with your gifts of wisdom, vision, courage, patience, and compassion, as we seek to build a transformed democracy in which all the gulfs that divide us are bridged and all that is broken is made whole. So may it be. Shalom. Blessed be. Insha'Allah. Aho. Shanti. Amen.
I need you, you need me. We're all a part of God's body. Stand with me, agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It is His will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive. I need you. You need me. We're all a part of God's body. Stand with me, agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It is His will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive. I pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. I pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. I pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. I pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. I pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. It is His will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive.
Thank you so much, Leah. Please open your hearts and minds to the words of Reverend Starsky Wilson.
Good morning. For just a few more minutes. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share today and for the invitation to the Board of Governors of the Veatch program, to the leadership of this grand congregation, to its interim leadership. I note that interim here means changing seats from one job to another. Great appreciation to Ned and to Joan. For those who have provided liturgical leadership for today, I'm greatly appreciative of your intentionality in sharing the beauty of the gifts that have been shared. And I can go home saying that I preached after a who. At what I, from this day forth, will suggest is the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Shelter Rock, the place for people who love justice and jazz. So thank you all very much. We do recognize, and we do not desire to belabor the hour, but I will invite your attention to my first political act, the choice of a text from which to preach. I go there and choose from the problematic Christian tradition the words of a problematic pastor by the name of Paul, who provides a censoring reading that does, at the very least, follow well with the song that has been sung. From the first letter to those who gathered the community at Corinth, the 12th chapter, beginning of the 12th verse, these words are penned. For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For in the one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slaves or free, and we were all made to drink of one Spirit. Indeed, the body does not consist of one member, but of many. If the foot would say, because I'm not a hand, I did not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear would say, because I'm not an eye, I did not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole body were hearing, where would the sense of smell be? But as it is, God arranged the members in the body, each one of them as God chose. If all were a single member, where would the body be? As it is, there are many members, yet one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you. Nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. On the contrary, the members of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And those members of the body that we think less honorable, we clothe with great honor, and our less respectable members are treated with greater respect. Whereas our more respectable members do not need this, but God has so arranged the body, giving the greater honor to the inferior member, that there may be no dissension within the body, but the members may have the same care for one another. If one member suffers, all suffer together with it. If one member is honored, all rejoice together with it. Now you are the body of Christ and individually members of it. And God has appointed in the church first apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then deeds of power, then gifts of healing, forms of assistance, forms of leadership, various kinds of tongues. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Do all work miracles? Do all possess the gifts of healing? Do all speak in tongues? Do all interpret? But strive for the greater gifts. So ends the reading and my first political act. Choosing a text is problematic. It is political, and perhaps even more so in a place like this. Y'all had me scared. Choosing to read from Paul is even more problematic because Paul is a problematic pastor. Paul is so problematic that the grandmother of Christian theologian and mystic Howard Thurman, though she loved the scriptures and loved the tradition and found great meaning and faith in them, as she stoked the inquiry into the scriptures for her grandson who could read by having him read the Bible to her, she said, yes, read from the Psalms. Please read from the Gospels, but skip over that guy by the name of Paul. Paul was problematic for at least 3 reasons. Paul was problematic because Paul was privileged. Paul was, at the very least, he engaged in some ambiguity as it relates to the acts of slavery in his time. We could not figure out really what he believed about it. In one passage, it seems that he is asking for slaves to be liberated. In another, he's telling slaves to obey their masters in all things as a means to get to the by and by. And she remembered that by and by part. She remembered that part that was read to slaves in the context of oppression in America in order to use religion to continue to colonize them and to keep them under oppression. And she said, I don't want to hear from him. Maybe she also didn't like Paul because, as we have come to know in the scriptures, there was a 2nd century bishop with an axe to grind who wrote under Paul's name. And he wrote things like, I permit no woman to speak in the assembly, but rather she should keep silent. And if she has a question, she should ask her husband when she gets home. Paul was problematic because the privilege of his male position, the privilege of his dual citizenship and access to Rome, the privilege of his capacity and education to pen these very words made him problematic. But Paul was also problematic because he's been privatized for piety. Throughout Paul's writing, we come to see the word righteousness, which in its strictest interpretation is actually the word equity or justice. But in the problem of translation into our language, we keep getting righteousness and we make it somehow about how we live our lives separate from other people doing good things or living in certain bounds rather than working toward God's vision of community that is reflected more in Paul's work than it is in Paul's writing. Paul's organizing orientation, because he believed that the Perusia was to come, that the empire would fall in his lifetime. Paul was not just a church planter. He actually believed that the communities he was establishing would be how people organized themselves once the empire fell around them. Paul, the community organizer who believed that at some point, because the oppression of people is not in God's will, sooner or later, all of this hell had to go. And people had to know how to organize themselves in relationship to one another once it was gone. But that Paul has been privatized in the interest of certain behaviors that align with empire. Howard Thurman's grandmother didn't want to hear from Paul because Paul, at least 3 problems with him. He was privileged and he was privatized for piety. But I don't listen to Howard Thurman's grandmother. I got a grandmother of my own, and Laureen Turner. The most educated, my mother called her the most educated domestic in North Texas. Growing up in Dallas, Texas, cleaning the homes in Highland Park where people like George W. Bush and Dick Cheney lived, catching Dallas area rapid transit with her grandchildren who went to hide out in those houses while she was cleaning them. She used to say something that I think she should have been in conversation with Howard Thurman's grandmother. She said, even a broke clock is right twice a day. So maybe Paul has something to say to us. And I believe Paul has value for moving toward democracy because of his work more than his writing. Because the community that Paul is writing to is divided and wrapped with inequity. In this letter, he writes to a community at Corinth. You could say they were on an island, but that wouldn't really be true. Corinth was an isthmus, but it was an isthmus that had situational relationship to one of the highest areas of exchange and merchant marketplace in their area. There in the Roman Empire, because it was on an isthmus, it was a place where people brought goods, sold goods, and there was an exchange of ideas. It was kind of the New York of Rome. And because they lived in the context of this multicultural marketplace, they were exposed to the exchange of ideas, but also the beliefs that people had about one another and people who were different. And in the context of that community and that kind of diversity, they had to figure out who they were going to be as a people. And I would suggest that they also abided in the context of apartheid. In 54 of AD, in that Roman city context, that trading post on an isthmus, this multicultural place with rapidly exchanging diverse ideas, they also exhibited schism-type activity in the life of the church because they were trying to figure out what to accept from outside of their community. They had a preoccupation with rank and upward mobility, societal ranking based upon social location that we see played out earlier when we read this letter based upon who they affiliated or associated themselves with. Some people said, I know Paul and I follow him, and people said, I follow Cephas, and others followed the brother by the name of Apollos. And this situational social location in a context of patronage was how they determined who had more value than others. In the context of that, all of these things, this social location based upon patronage and abilities was also culturally mediated. And they were a culturally diverse society. This is what we find here in our own nation. I would argue this is what we found, at least, I use my I voice. This is what I found when we look very closely at the heart of America, the gateway to the West in St. Louis and Ferguson, when all things ceased to be what they had been on August 9th, 2014. When one of our children, an 18-year-old boy, lay dead in the street for 4.5 hours, and he laid there perhaps just long enough for us to rethink where we were living. And we saw the same kind of honor-shame continuum where some people were more valuable than other people based upon the fragmentations of society. Some played out by virtue of our regional organizations. Some played out by virtue of who we hung out with. I follow the Regional Business Council because I'm a corporate citizen. I follow those in the life of the church. I follow this particular Jewish faith, and we are Reformed Jews, and we are Orthodox Jews. We had that kind of division as well. Perhaps you find that around here every now and then. This is the condition of our country, those who find themselves on this same honor-shame continuum, believing that they are better than others, and thus militating against the kind of community that we say we desire. The challenge, though, the reason why I choose this, as Big Mama said, Paul had some value, is because I believe problematic Paul paints the picture and points the people to the creation of a new community marked by expansive democracy. What is Paul up to? Paul is trying to organize folk and telling them in these passages that everybody has the same worth, everybody has something that everybody else needs, and no one's stuff is more valuable than other folks' stuff. That's the whole passage. I could have just read it, but he said it that way. Paul says, if you want a new community that affirms and moves toward democracy in the language of our day, first and foremost, you must affirm that in this community, we honor the democratization of gifts, of charisms. We don't believe that anybody has it all or has all the answers. We believe that God has so ordered that the gifts have been spread out among all folks. This is what we found in the context of the Ferguson uprising. A lot of people invite me to come speak places because I coach here at the Ferguson Commission. I try to tell them that they got the chronology wrong because the commission took 90 days to come into order, 90 days after it had been called. And quite frankly, if it had not been for young people who remained in the streets for those 90 days, there would be no commission. And so, although they do not know their names, they are appointing, they are giving, they are anointing upon us who happen to have some dark suits and white shirts with French cuffs, the opportunity to speak in the place of those who actually provided leadership before us. There was a gift and a granting of leadership to our community by unnamed people who happen to be dark in hue, who happen to be queer in orientation, who happen to be female in gender identity, and because they are who they are, people look over their leadership to ask for people like me. First, in this community, if we will have true democracy and move toward it, we must honor the democratization of gifts. We must honor that when we have the kind of adaptive challenges that will shut down a government, that the community needs different things as it relates to leadership. We need, indeed, those who will invite us to a space and a place of learning. Create spaces so that we learn enough to change our behavior. But before that, we need those who are willing to disrupt our spaces and our sensibilities so we know we need to learn something different. And not only in this community must we honor the democratization of gifts, but in this community we must embrace a diversity of gifts. Democratization suggesting that it's all spread around in different people. Diversity suggesting that it operates in a manner that is distinct from one to the other. Here we found out when we ran the commission process that we had to redefine what others call experts. In the ritual act, the religious act of commissions, riot commissions in American civil religion, that which we do every time hell breaks loose, we recognize, in as much as I recognize that there are people watching their watches right now, we also recognize that we have to redefine expert. Lindsay Lupo suggests that every time hell breaks out in America, now we call it race riots, but if we're honest about our history, 100 years ago we were calling them ethnic conflagrations because they were German immigrants trying to engage in society. There were Jewish folks trying to engage in society, and they were being locked out, and it led to the same kind of fights that we now see militarized on television. In those moments, we recognize that the expert is not just people who have PhDs and stuff, but people who have life experience and stuff. So in the commission, we had to, as we use it as an organizing tool, we had to affirm the voices of people who had been hurt. We had to hear first. Yes, we had to hear from the economists from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, but first we had to hear from the sister who worked at McDonald's and worked 2 full shifts in order to buy 1 pack of Pampers for her 2-year-old. If we had not heard from her and only heard from him, then perhaps we would not have affirmed that the minimum wage needed to be increased. In this community, we embrace a diversity of gifts. In this community, we honor the democratization of gifts, but in this community, it is also the case that equity inverts the honor-shame continuum. One of the things we finally affirmed in the community report was that we needed to seek out a path toward racial equity. Spoken in theological language, we believe that a realized eschatology, our hope for the future, was not getting to heaven. But we needed to ameliorate the hell that people were getting on earth by closing the gaps in socioeconomic position. We didn't want to actually affirm that we were better than somebody else based on who we knew or where we lived, but rather we wanted to lean into a world and create a society in which those gaps did not exist. That's what the 3,000 people who gathered through the commission process actually wanted. And so, this is what we offer. If we will struggle to create community, we might want to follow the problematic example of Paul, or follow the problematic pastor who is Paul, in affirming that in this community, We honor the democratization of gifts. In this community, we embrace the diversity of gifts, and in this community, equity inverts the honor, shame continuum. As I go to my seat, I must suggest that if we will do this, we must say first that freedom for the prisoner is the key to a new community. But I forgot to tell you about Paul, and y'all were paying really close attention. You said there were 3 things that were problematic about Paul. You only told me 2. Well, I'll tell you the last one, and then I'll go to my seat. Yes, Paul was problematic because he's been privatized for piety. Paul was problematic because he was privileged, but Paul was also problematic because he was a political prisoner. 2 years after the publication, the public reading of this particular letter, Paul gets locked up. Later, Paul gets locked up again because he ventures to interfere with the exploitation of a young girl who a couple of people in the community are using to make money for themselves by using her to entertain people. Now, you can talk about that and make that explication to everything today if you want to. I want to argue, though, that this response, his politicized response, was to the oppression of the empire. Paul, who is a prisoner, Paul, who is a pastor, Paul, who is one who has been fully converted, approximates the position of 2.3 million Americans, robbed of the franchise in 1,719 state prisons, gathered together in 1,852 juvenile jails, fostering their existence in 102 federal prisons, gathered in 3,163 local jails and over 80 Indian country jails, military prisons, immigration detention facilities. How do you get to a realized democracy with 2.3 million people locked up without the franchise? Paul is problematic because he exhibits the problems of criminalization and how it hinders our democracy. Not only do we lose the actual gifts of 2.3 million people that are required for the fulfillment of the body in Paul's vision, but we also, because we have narratives about who is a criminal, infused with implicit bias and the othering of immigrant communities, it causes a regression to a ranking on an honor-shame continuum. So that we say because criminals only come from the South, we need a wall only in the South. Because criminals only abide in urban communities, even though we could get just as many drug offenses if we went on college campuses. We'll just go to these urban communities. Paul is highly problematic for the concept of building community because Paul represents the people we have locked out. But Paul is the one who wrote for us the prescription. Paul is the one who was organizing the community. And we can't move toward democracy while Paul is locked up in our prisons or imprisoned in the implicit bias of our minds. Who is Paul? And what might we do to unlock his possibilities and perhaps unlock expansive democracy for us all?
More to comment. One, please join us for the panel. These are crucial and critical times. But hymn number 1024, 1024, when the Spirit says do, is the perfect hymn for this particular moment in our service and perhaps in our lives. 1024, please stand as you are able, and let's join together.
You got
Our closing words come from American author Marianne Williamson. She writes, "In every community there is work to be done. In every nation there are wounds to heal. In every heart there is the power to do it."